Hi and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is how I start one of these talks. I think about it and I start to muse in my head. I write down notes, I gather material. So here's my thinking about what I'm going to say to start with. It's a bit overdone really. So, where do we go? Where do we start? This is going to be a ramble. I just wrote this down a minute ago. A ramble of words, birds and books. And it's prompted by, last night I got a call or a message about someone who decided that in her retirement she'd like to become a bird watcher. And so I offered to be a teacher of bird watching and even bird photography. So when someone comes to you and says, I want to be a bird watcher, how do I go about it? What do you say, what do you do? I think I've spoken about this before on my channel. The one who got me started into bird watching was my dad many years ago. And I had this unhappy habit of, you can hear birds in the backyard. When I was a young lad, I had an air rifle and I used to shoot sparrows in the backyard, and anything else that happened to be there. Became quite deadly at that, and that continued on into my early teenage years when I was 13. But my dad and other people could see that it wasn't a good trait that I was developing, so he suggested, Jeff, you need to take up bird watching and watch them, and then later on to photograph them rather than shoot them. So I did. So how do you get started? Well, I bought a little book, I've got it in there somewhere, called Some Common Australian Birds. In fact, I found a video yesterday about some common Australian birds by a YouTuber. I'll put that on underneath because it's quite good actually, and a good place to get started probably. However, so the Christmas after my dad told me I should become a bird watcher, as a 13-year-old, I got a present in my Christmas stocking, and it was this. Look at that. Actually, this is not the exact ones that I got. I've still got the exact ones that I got, but this is a pair that I bought that actually work okay. The other ones are a bit damaged. 7 by 50, I think the other one I had was a 12 by 50 binoculars. So this is what he suggested. He said, get a bird book, get a ground sheet to go and sit on the ground and watch the birds. Just stay there and watch them through your binoculars. So I did that. And over the years, I've become reasonably knowledgeable about birds, and then got into bird photography when I had some equipment that could actually do it. So that's how I got started. Of course, you know, these days you can get bird books like this. I saw a video recently of a man explaining some of the different field guides you can get, and this is Simpson and Day. But there are actually bird apps you can get on your phone now that are fantastic, which have got all the everything about the birds, pictures of them, their sounds, their calls, nesting habits, where they're located, how rare they are, all that sort of stuff. And those sort of apps are available around the world in the different countries as well. So it's always a good thing. I have one, and I used to take a bird book like that with me on every trip, but now I've just got my phone app, which I rely on most of the time, to identify the birds. So let's have a think about birds. Is there still a bird yet to be discovered in Australia that no one's ever seen yet? Maybe. I read in one of these older books that I've got here that there was some bird that they were still trying to find, and they were waiting for someone to come up with it. I don't know whether that was ever found. I can't remember where it was. I read in one of these thick books. I'll show you some books in a minute. And but one of the interesting things in this book here, where is it? Flight of the Emu. This is about the history of from 100 years of Australian ornithology from 1901 to 2001, and it's edited and put together by Libby Robin. It's a fantastic read about all the bird organisations that started off in the early days of Australian settlement, or a little bit later than the very early days, but people were into identifying their birds in the early days. And it shows how that over the years, bird watching in Australia has been a combination of professional people doing it and amateur people doing it, and sort of collaborating. A very good friend of ours is in her retirement is very involved with Birds Australia or doing voluntary work, tagging birds and all that sort of stuff. And you can get very involved if you want to in bird conversation. So anyway, what I was going to say was, in this book there was a story, and I've noticed this behaviour before. It's called anting, and up until several years ago no one knew what anting was in birds, but this young boy wrote into one of these popular authors and writers and bird experts about a habit that he'd seen of I think it was a starling putting ants underneath its wing and flying off with them. And he wrote to, I think it was to Alex Chisholm. Got one of Alex's books here. Yeah. Alex was one of the well-known people, Bird Wonders of Australia, Alex Chisholm. And he wrote lots of books, and I've got other ones of his books here. And he's mentioned in this book, The Flight of the Emu, as well. And anyway, he wrote to Alex Chisholm, and Alex Chisholm hadn't heard of it. So he started investigating it and found indeed that there were other reports of this sort of behaviour going on in other parts of the world. And they weren't exactly sure as to the reasons why bird anting is done by birds, but you might look that up. I think I've spoken about it before on this channel. So, and whether you'll find a parrot or a bird that's not been found before, sometimes there are birds that are believed to have gone into extinction, and there are several birds in Australia since settlement that famous birds have gone extinct and are very hard to find now, and if at all, and probably are extinct. But one in particular over the last several years was the night parrot. And in this book here, it talks about the early days of people looking for the night parrot. There's a very big article in here. It's called Searching for Night Parrots. And there's an interesting poem here. And I'll read the poem from another book about the night parrot by Penny Olsen in a minute as well. If at all, then, fringe dwellers of the centre, ghosts of samphire, navigators of the star-clustered tussocks, of salty marsh, limestone niches and acrid airs, if at all, then flitting obscurely the rims of water tanks, the outlands of spotlights and filaments of power lines, in brief nocturnal flight with long drawn-out mournful whistle, if at all, then moths in a paper lantern. That's John Kinsella from a poem called The Night Parrot. Now, the night parrot is very similar to another Australian parrot called the ground parrot. They look very similar and have got similar habits, and the ground parrots are reasonably plentiful, I think. But the night parrot, for many years, in the last 20 years, was a mystery. People kept coming across them, dead ones, on the road every now and then, just enough to keep people interested to think that this elusive parrot might still be alive. And in fact, it did end up getting discovered. And just a few short years ago, a lot of controversy over who found it and whether it was real or not. And he was an amateur, I think, as against the professionals. But there's an interesting poem in here, similar to that one I just read, if I can find it. Penny Olsen is an Australian author, does a lot on books, on birds, I mean. Where are we? Where's this poem? I can't find it now. I might come back to it afterwards and quote it to you, but that's not important. So anyway, the night parrot was found, and I sort of think, well, people who are amateurs might still find something interesting. I'm going to show at the end of this video some clips of some apostle birds that we came across on a family holiday at Silverton near Broken Hill several years ago, and we were feeding them breadcrumbs and things alongside of us, where we're having a picnic in a dried up creek bed near Silverton, which is near New South Wales. And I got some footage taken on there's other footage of it on another thing I did on the apostle bird, of these apostle birds foraging around in this dried up creek bed. And my late father-in-law, Dud Faracre, was there with us, and he was a great amateur. He was never university trained or anything, but people, university people and people in charge of local governments used to consult him on a wide range of things. He was a conservationist and a plant nursery man, but a brilliant person on birds and flowers and flora and fauna and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, he was with us when we were watching these apostle birds. Apostle birds are birds that go around in groups, and that's why they originally, small groups, that's why they originally called apostle birds in honour or deference to the 12 apostles that followed Jesus. And they are in small groups. I first saw them when I was 14 up on the sheep station, actually, on the Darling River, on Bindara station. Anyway, we were watching these, and Dad was, as he does, or used to, he would be sitting around observing, always watching, always learning, always analysing what was going on around him. And towards the end of this little clip I'll show you later on, and unfortunately I didn't swing my camera up. I was using my Canon XL1 mini DV camera. I didn't swing it up to actually get what he was looking at, but you'll hear him talking about what he was spotting up in the top of this tree. And his idea was that, and I don't know, I haven't read this anywhere else, maybe hints of it in some of the other readings I've read, but his theory was, he said, that bird up there is replacing, it's being replaced every now and then. It's a sentry, it's a lookout. It's up in the top of that tree, it's looking out for danger, and every now and then another bird goes up and takes its place, and there's always a person up there while all these other birds are on the ground. And I'm going to show a little bit more of that, him saying those comments on the birds, and I might send it into Birds Australia or BirdLife Australia and see what someone like Sean Dooley can make a comment on it. So, you know, you never know what you're going to discover in this world. Now, as far as the people, the main players, I mean, in the early days, there's so many, for a person who wants to really get into bird watching and learning and photography even, if you want to go down that track, there's so much interesting literature out there. Here's one that someone gave this to me as a gift. This is a limited edition, actually. This is a South Australian edition of John Gould, the famous this is a special Gould exhibition launch edition, limited to 100 copies, each signed and numbered by the author. Sean Davies was the author, I think. No, Sean Dawes. And I've got number 60. And this is, it is available in other editions, but this is a limited edition for this expedition. But this was mainly about John Gould's forays into South Australia in the early days. He was the famous bird artist, or his wife was anyway, and it's a fascinating book because all the birds that are around here, this was all wilderness area back in the time when he was here, and all the birds that he talks about in that book are still all here. They just live in suburbia, some of them, and then further out, that are still in existence. And so all the birds that are around us here are relatives and descendants from those birds that John Gould was describing in his expeditions just north of here, up past Gawler from Adelaide. So that's a fascinating book. What else have we got here? Well, there's a bit more about John Gould, The Business of Nature. That was written, I think, Rosalind Russell, and it's got other birds similar to this, about the how much of an entrepreneur he was, and how he, this is some of his books, some of his pictures, drawings, that his wife did a lot of these. And so there's a big business in birds, in bird photography and, excuse me, bird watching, bird tours, and everything, bird writing. As far as painting concerned, this man died a few years ago now, William Cooper. And another, it's a forward by Penny Olsen. She gets her name on a lot of these bird books. He was considered to be the doyen of bird artists in Australia, and there's videos on him. I can put some links to that, but he was certainly a where are we? Some of his illustrations there. But William Cooper, you should look him up, and there's been some videos made that you can still get hold of on him being interviewed and showing his way of doing his drawings up in Queensland. Not all that long ago that he died. When I first discovered him, he was still going. That's him. What's this one? Another one by Penny Olsen. She's getting a good mention. Feathers and Brush, 3 Centuries of Australian Bird Art. That's a really good one. And there's lots of interesting things in here. We mentioned Alec Chisholm before. A lot of these people are, well, not Penny Olsen, but some of the people that I'm talking about today are not around anymore. And Land of Wonder, and he's the one that did the Bird Wonders of Australia as well, but he was just talking about Australia in particular, all the different flora and fauna. In fact, Graham Pizzey, who's also mentioned in that The Flight of the Emu book, he wrote about Australia, Discovery of Wild Australia by Explorers and Naturalists, selected and annotated by Graham Pizzey, and he's dead now too, but a separate creation. He said that Australia was so unique in its flora and fauna that it was almost like a separate creation to the rest of the world, and in some ways it is. And as I'm also a creationist, not an evolutionist, when we talk about the flight of the emu, we all think that's stupid, emus don't fly, and I don't think they ever did. I think they were made exactly that way. So, and of course, we were a different creation, because think of the platypus. How could you evolve into a platypus? It's got a bit of everything in it. And anyway, that's another subject. So what else have we got here? This one here is by H.J. Frith. I've got a couple of copies of this. The malleefowl, which is a very interesting bird that is a mound builder. There's not many mound builders, and I've got photographs that I've taken. One of the first bird photographs I ever took was of one of these birds, a malleefowl. They build a big mound of dirt, and there's about 5 or 6 species around the world, in Australia and New Guinea in particular, I think, or Indonesia, who build mounds, and they lay their eggs, bury them deep, and then they tend the nest, and the heat of the vegetation in the nest, that incubates the eggs, and they eventually come out. And they are fascinating birds. I've seen them in the wild, and there's still quite a few of them around, although they're reasonably rare in some parts, and they need to be protected. Malleefowl's quite a big bird. My late father-in-law, who I talked about before, used to have a captive one in his aviary in his backyard that he had for many years, which he rescued. People used to bring birds for him to revive after they'd been found, maybe hit by a car or whatever. And so I was very familiar with the malleefowl growing up, watching it in the backyard. What else? Ronald McDonald. He's, sorry, not Ronald McDonald, that's another McDonald. J.D. McDonald. This is another bird book, and it's illustrated by Peter Slater, who also is now the late Peter Slater, but he did lots of bird illustration books and bird guides, and amongst all the others. So I don't know how much more I want to go with this. What else did I have written down here? The bird apps. The night parrot, yeah, getting back to the night parrot, for many years it was thought to be extinct, and I sort of liken it a bit in my lifetime. I had the same journey with the night parrot that I've also had, and many other Australians have had, with the Thylacine, the Tasmanian Tiger, which is believed to be extinct. But a lot of people still think it's alive in Tasmania, in the wilds of Tasmania, and even on the mainland in some parts. And it's really quite interesting that it may, like the night parrot, it may still be discovered. I remember years ago, before I was a photographer, and I was very intrigued by the Tasmanian tiger, and I was on holidays one year. It was before I was married. I didn't even have a camera. I wasn't into photography at that stage. But a friend of mine lived at Mount Gambier down at the southeast of South Australia, and there's lots of forests and whatever down there, and people had said they'd seen the Tasmanian tiger down there. So one year I decided to go on an expedition during my holidays to visit a friend of mine who was school teaching in Mount Gambier, just to see if I can spot a Thylacine. Well, I didn't. And I was very ill prepared to actually, even if I saw one, how was I going to prove that I saw one? I didn't have a camera. I didn't have any idea of what I was actually doing, but I did on the way to Mount Gambier. I sat down in a forest, lit a campfire, boiled the billy. I don't know whether I cooked anything on the campfire, but I didn't see a Thylacine, and that was the end of my expedition, really. But I had ideas about it, and lots of young people are still enthused about this idea, and you'll see lots of YouTube videos of people still trying to find the Thylacine. So who knows, they might one day, because Tasmania in particular is a lot of wilderness there, and it could still be there. Anyway, maybe I can put some links to something about that underneath here. So what else? bird photography is a whole nother subject again, and there's heaps of people doing stuff about bird photography on YouTube, so look them up. I've got some things about how I go about photographing birds on my channel as well. You can hear that bird in the background. A lot of people don't like that little bird. He's called the noisy miner. He's an Australian honeyeater, native Australian honeyeater. And I'm not sure whether that's him or his baby looking for food. But they're very aggressive birds. They will chase off other birds. We used to have lots of birds in this backyard. Now we have the big magpies, and there's one sitting up on the clothesline, one of these noisy miners at the moment. But the magpies come in, they're not afraid of the noisy miners, but they're very boisterous. But the good thing about them, people malign them and don't like them, but the good thing about them, they're called the, what are they called? The watchdog of the bush. Because if they were out in the bush, or if I had a snake in this backyard, that bird would alert me to it. If it sees the cat, it goes berserk. There's another funny bit where I'm trying to do a talk about photography using light meters on this channel somewhere, and with my friend Greg was standing over there doing this, and the cat was wandering across here, and these noisy miners were going off their tree because the cat was there. I gave up doing the talk about the light meter. I'll have to put a link underneath and show you that. Anyway, I've been going on for what, 21 and a half minutes now. So I'll try and just put a little bit of this extra bit at the back about the apostle birds, where my late father-in-law was making this observation about them posting sentries, lookouts to look over the flock. They're a very communal bird. Anyway, thanks for watching. Just stay with us. If you've gone this far, you've done very well. But stay with us and find your way through to and just watch this little bit of vision that I'm going to put on the end of this about the apostle birds posting a sentry. So thanks for watching. Like if you like, subscribe if you wish, and I'll see you next time. See you later.
Why won't you eat them on vegetable?
Why won't you eat one? Well, I'd eat that with reference to it, the sandwich if I have to buy, because I just refuse to pay the price for a sandwich.
You had a
You first noticed the tail,
Yeah.
well, they're back on the same limb, exactly the same limb.
So you reckon they operate as a scout?
I reckon they operate as a scout.
Mm. Well, he certainly brought all the others back.
Yeah, because that's where they seem to go, to that area.
Mm. Yeah, I'm coming.
Yeah.